Senator, thanks for being here. I know you've been in D.C. all week and came in today.
Last night.
Last night, so thank you. And then I'm also here standing with Councilmember Jack Christie and Councilmember Travis.
Right behind you, Mayor.
Okay, and Councilmember Kubash. You know, we've been talking a lot about how the federal government has a long way to go to fund Houston's recovery from Hurricane Harvey and Houston's future as a more resilient city that does more to limit flooding from future storms. But today, at the end of last year, I want to talk about something that's happened that's very positive for the city of Houston. Senator Cruz introduced the Hurricane Tax Relief Bill, which became law. And that was the end of last year. In fact, we were going to hold this press conference last year. But the schedule for the Senate was very, very busy, and so I'm glad that we're able to do it today, Senator. The law allows a huge number of people and businesses in the entire Houston area to cut the amount of federal income taxes they pay for 2017. That means Houstonians will have more money in their pockets to get their lives and possessions back to normal. And without stealing his thunder, since he was the author and he knows this much better than any of us, let me stop and ask Senator Cruz to explain the rest of the bill that he authored, passed, and now we'll take effect. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mayor, council members. Thank you for being here. You know, all of us in the wake of Hurricane Harvey, we saw Texans come together. We saw the city of Houston unite. We saw Texans across our state unite from the first moments when the hurricane came into the Gulf of Mexico and was beginning landfall up until the search and rescue throughout the crisis to the process of rebuilding that continues today. We saw the very face, the very spirit of Texas and the very face and spirit of my hometown, Houston. I will say I think the mayor has done a tremendous job, an extraordinary job leading our city during this very challenging time. During the hurricane, the mayor and I were speaking on the phone on a daily basis, coordinating city resources with county resources, with state resources, with federal resources, and we all came together to get through this crisis. That's who we are as Texans, and it is encouraging going forward. In the months that have followed, we have seen two major disaster relief bills pass through Congress. The first that came through Congress came through the House of Representatives at $7.5 billion. And I was very pleased to join with Senator John Cornyn in the Senate in doubling that disaster relief bill from $7.5 billion to over $15 billion. And that passed into law, providing the first wave of federal disaster relief to the families, to the communities all around the Gulf Coast that were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. The second wave of federal disaster relief occurred in the fall of last year. Over $36 billion was the second wave of disaster relief, flood insurance, and funding to help people get housing, help people rebuild. For both of those, we saw bipartisan agreement. We saw Republicans and Democrats coming together, and we saw the Texas delegation standing as one, united throughout the entire process. The Texas delegation would regularly meet together, senators, House members, Republicans, Democrats, and the governor all working together to say, how do we make sure that Texas has what it needs to rebuild? And at the same time, we also passed a major hurricane tax relief bill last year. Everyone knows about the big tax cut that was passed at the end of the year for Congress. That's going to impact and benefit Americans all across the country. But the hurricane tax relief bill is targeted for those who were impacted by Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Irma or Hurricane Maria. And it passed into law, and it directly benefits millions of Texans and millions of Houstonians. I joined with House member Kevin Brady. Kevin Brady carried the legislation in the House. And in the Senate, I joined with Senator John Cornyn and Senator Marco Rubio. The legislation in the Senate was the Cruz, Cornyn, Rubio legislation, and it did four critical things that benefit Houstonians. Number one, if your home was damaged in the storm and you have property casualty losses from the damage, under this tax relief legislation that passed, you can deduct those damages on your taxes. without being subject to the ordinary limitations that apply otherwise. Usually, they have to exceed 10% of your income, but for Hurricane Harvey and Maria and Irma, they don't. You can deduct them. Even if you don't itemize your taxes, you can deduct those losses. That is billions of dollars of tax savings for Texans and those who are hurting under Hurricane Harvey. A second element of the legislation provides that if your home was damaged, you can withdraw from your retirement savings, from your 401k, from your IRA. You can pull that money out and use it to rebuild without having to pay the ordinary 10% penalty for early withdrawal. That enables Houstonians to access your own savings that you've put aside to begin the process of rebuilding, to get back on your feet. That, again, is an enormous benefit. Millions of dollars that Houstonians, that Texans can access to rebuild their homes. Number three, the legislation encouraged charitable giving in the year 2017 to charities that give to hurricane relief. And it exempted charitable giving for individuals or corporations from the ordinary limits if they were giving to charities focused on hurricane relief for Harvey and Irma and Maria. And then finally what it did, there were thousands upon thousands of businesses in Houston and all across the Gulf Coast whose businesses were shut down, whose businesses were underwater, whose employees couldn't come into work, but the employers kept paying them anyway. The employers did the right thing. They made the right decision to keep the paychecks coming. Look, the employees may have had their living room underwater, but the business was underwater too. And this legislation allows a tax credit for those employers, for those small businesses that kept the salaries going, kept the paychecks going. It gives a tax credit for those small businesses. And so the purpose of this press conference is very simple: to make sure Houstonians know that there are billions of dollars of tax benefits that were in the Cruz, Cornyn, Rubio legislation. They passed both houses of Congress and were signed into law, and so they're applicable to the people in the city of Houston, all up and down the Gulf Coast as we rebuild from this storm.
Thank you, Senator. We certainly want people to know, and we certainly want people to take advantage. This is tax season, and again, one thing to highlight: even if you don't itemize, you can certainly take advantage of the benefits. So thank you, Senator Cruz, and to the others for making it happen. And I know that there are a lot of Houstonians, quite frankly, people in the affected regions in Texas that were benefited by it. We're working with the delegation to make sure Houston gets its fair share of funding for flood recovery and to rebuild as a smarter, stronger, more resilient, more flood-resistant city. This is all a part of it. And without the money for flood mitigation, we may have to come back to the federal government after the next flood and ask for funds to repair the same places that flooded this year. And it makes no sense for Houstonians and for taxpayers all across America to have to come back again. We certainly don't want funding for failure, and so we are constantly emphasizing that point. We want to emphasize, and I want to thank Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, and others, because we have simply said, Houstonians, we're not begging for anything. We simply wanted to be treated fairly and treated the same way that people treated New Orleans after Katrina and the Northeast after Sandy. The funds that we need to make sure that we are able to build stronger and be more resilient. We don't want people simply to build in the same spot without us having the mitigation efforts. So I want to thank Senator Cruz for his efforts. Literally thousands of Houstonians and people in the affected region will benefit that. Businesses, certainly want to thank him for that, because there were a lot of businesses in our area that continue to assist, help their employees, came out of their pockets even when they were directly impacted. So this will impact them as well. And so it's our hope that with what the legislation that has already been passed and signed, and then with the next tranche of money that come, and hopefully it will come January the 19th, hopefully, and then hopefully that won't be the last, since I have him here, we're all going to show some love. So, we really need Senator Cruz's help and others in order to make sure that people are able to rebuild and that city is able to be rebuilt, but in a stronger, more resilient fashion. In order for that to happen, we need more money to expand the bayous. We need more money for the detention basins. We need more money for the coastal spine, for the third reservoir in West Houston, to elevate people's homes, and for the buyout programs. And if we get that done, then combined with this tax relief, it will certainly be a bright 2018 for all of us in the affected region.